After the move, the former tenant said, "I forgot the hidden cameras, but—" Those words landed like a bomb in the quiet living room. Mark froze, his phone still pressed to his ear. Across the room, his wife Elena was arranging plates inside a cabinet, humming softly, unaware that their entire sense of safety had just cracked open. Hidden cameras. The sentence replayed in Mark's head again and again, each time sounding worse than before. "What do you mean, hidden cameras?" Mark asked slowly, his voice tight. On the other end, the former tenant laughed nervously, as if this were some harmless joke. "Oh, nothing illegal. I used them to monitor my stuff. I thought I removed them all before moving out. Just thought you should know." The call ended before Mark could ask another question. Mark stood there, staring at the blank wall, his heart pounding. Elena turned around, sensing something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. Mark didn't answer immediately. He scanned the room, the ceiling corners, the bookshelf, the smoke detector. For the first time since they moved in 3 days ago, the house didn't feel like home. It felt like a stage. He said, "The previous tenant said he forgot the hidden cameras," Mark finally said. Elena laughed at first, assuming it had to be a misunderstanding. "That's not funny." "I don't think he was joking." The laughter faded from her face. They had moved into the house because it was perfect. Too perfect, quiet neighborhood. Fresh paint, cheap rent for such a spacious place. The landlord had been eager, almost desperate, to sign them quickly. At the time, Mark had felt lucky. Now luck felt like a trap. They searched the house that night with their phones' flashlights, crawling under furniture, checking vents, examining every screw and outlet. They found nothing, no blinking lights. No wires, no obvious lenses. By midnight, exhaustion won. "It's probably nothing," Elena said, though her voice trembled. "Maybe he just wanted to mess with us." Mark nodded, but he didn't sleep, because something felt wrong. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Mark woke up suddenly. Not from a sound, but from a feeling. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. He sat up in bed and listened. Silence. Elena slept beside him, her breathing slow and even. Mark scanned the bedroom, the mirror, the closet door, the air vent above the window. Then his phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "I see you're awake." Mark's blood turned cold. He stared at the screen, hoping it was a prank, hoping it was spam, hoping it was anything else. Another message arrived. "Relax. I told you about the cameras, didn't I?" Mark jumped out of bed, his hands shaking as he typed. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "You already know." Mark felt his legs weaken. He looked around the room again, his eyes desperately searching for something he had missed. "Where are the cameras?" he typed. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Everywhere you didn't think to look. Mark rushed to the living room, turning on every light. He felt exposed, stripped of privacy, as if the walls themselves were alive. He sent another message. "You're spying on us." "That's illegal." The response came with a laughing emoji. "Not if you agreed to live there knowing they existed." "I didn't agree to anything," Mark typed. "You stayed, didn't you?" Mark's stomach dropped. The truth hit him hard. They had stayed. After the warning. After the call. After the doubt. Elena entered the room, frightened by the lights and Mark's pale face. "What's going on?" Mark showed her the messages. She covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "This isn't real. This can't be real." Another message buzzed in. "Don't panic. I don't care about you. I only watch to protect what's mine." "What's yours?" Mark typed. The reply took longer this time. "The house." Elena whispered, "We need to leave, right now." Mark nodded, already grabbing their car keys. They didn't pack, they didn't argue. They just ran. As they reached the front door, Mark's phone buzzed again. "You can leave," the message read. "But you won't outrun the truth." They drove through the night, stopping only when the sun began to rise. At a cheap motel on the edge of town, they finally felt safe enough to breathe. But safety was an illusion, because while they were gone, someone was still watching, and the cameras were still recording. If you think this is just another creepy house story, stay with me, because what they discovered next would expose a secret so disturbing, it would change how they understood privacy forever. And before this story ends, you'll question how much of your own life might already be seen by someone else. This is only the beginning. The motel room smelled of cheap detergent and old carpet, but to Mark and Elena, it felt like a sanctuary, a place without eyes in the walls A place where silence didn't feel hostile, or so they thought. Mark locked the door, then checked it again. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the blank television screen as if it might suddenly turn on by itself. "We should call the police," she said quietly. Mark hesitated. "And tell them what? That a former tenant claims there are hidden cameras, but we didn't find any?" Elena looked at him sharply. "He messaged you. He knew you were awake. That's proof." Mark nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. What if the police didn't take it seriously? What if it made things worse? His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Mark's heart slammed against his ribs. He didn't want to open it, but he did. "You're not in the house anymore," Elena gasped. "How does he know?" Mark typed with shaking fingers. "You're following us now?" The reply came after a pause. "No, I don't need to." Mark's mind raced. Had there been cameras outside too? In the driveway? On the street? Another message appeared. "You should have listened when I said the house was mine." Elena grabbed Mark's arm. "We can't stay here. If he can see us, this isn't safe either." Mark stood up suddenly, anger cutting through his fear. "No, running won't fix this. We're done being hunted." He opened his laptop and connected to the motel's Wi-Fi. If there were cameras, there had to be a network, a signal, something that left traces. Mark wasn't a hacker, but he worked in IT long enough to know one thing. Devices talk to each other. And sometimes they talk too much. He began scanning nearby networks. At first, nothing unusual appeared. Just the motel's Wi-Fi, a few guest hotspots, a printer. Then he saw it, a hidden network. "No name, strong signal." "That's strange," Mark muttered. Elena leaned closer. "What does that mean?" "It means there's a private network nearby, one that doesn't want to be seen." Mark ran a deeper scan, his breath caught. The network wasn't just nearby. It was moving, following them. "No," Mark whispered, "that's not possible." The signal's strength shifted, fluctuating as if the source was adjusting. As if it were alive, Elena's voice trembled. "Mark, what's happening?" Before he could answer, a new message arrived. "You're clever. I always like clever tenants." Mark slammed the laptop shut. "That's it, we're calling the police." They dialed emergency services and explained everything. The call operator listened carefully, her tone calm but serious. "Stay where you are," she said. "Officers are on the way." For the first time since the nightmare began, Elena felt a flicker of relief. But it didn't last. 5 minutes later, the motel room phone rang. They stared at it frozen. Mark slowly picked it up. "Yes?" A familiar voice answered, the former tenant. "You shouldn't involve the police." Mark's blood boiled. "You don't get to tell us what to do." The man chuckled softly. "I get to tell you many things. Like how the house you lived in was built for observation." "Not comfort," Elena whispered. "Put it on speaker." Mark did. "What are you talking about?" Elena demanded. "The walls," the man replied. "The vents, the wiring. They were designed decades ago. Long before tiny cameras were common." Mark felt sick. Designed by who? By people who understood that watching is power. The line went dead. Moments later, police sirens echoed outside the motel. 2 officers entered the room, their expressions serious. Mark and Elena told the story again, this time showing the messages, the call logs, the hidden network scan. The officers exchanged glances. "This isn't the first complaint about that house," one of them admitted. Elena's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "There have been reports over the years, different tenants. Similar stories, always unproven." Mark clenched his fists. "So you're saying he gets away with it every time?" "For now," the officer said. "But we'll investigate." They escorted Mark and Elena to the station to give formal statements. Hours passed. Dawn turned into full morning. Finally, they were allowed to leave. But the relief they expected never came. Because as they stepped outside the station, Mark's phone buzzed one more time. "You did exactly what I expected." Mark stared at the screen, rage and fear mixing inside him. "You think this ends here?" The reply was immediate. "It doesn't end. It escalates." Elena whispered, "He's enjoying this." Mark nodded slowly. "Then we stopped playing defense." That afternoon, Mark returned to the house alone. The police had advised against it, but Mark knew something now. The man wasn't just watching randomly. He was attached to that house, obsessed with it. Which meant his weakness was there too. Mark walked through the empty rooms, the silence thick and heavy. He felt eyes on him again, but this time he welcomed it. "Watching me?" he said aloud. His phone buzzed. "Always." Mark smiled grimly. "Good," he whispered. because now I'm watching back. And somewhere behind the walls, something shifted. Something that had been hidden for far too long. The game had truly begun. Mark stood alone in the center of the living room, the echo of his own breathing filling the space. The house felt different now, not quiet, but alert. As if it knew he had returned with purpose. His phone buzzed. "You came back." Mark didn't respond. Instead, he opened his laptop and placed it on the dining table. He had prepared for this. Overnight, he had studied old property records, archived listings, even obscure forums where former tenants shared stories that sounded more like paranoia than fact. Until now, the house had a history. Not just one tenant who watched too much, but decades of strange renovations, unregistered modifications, and sudden ownership changes. Always the same pattern. Someone moved in. Someone moved out quietly. Someone stopped talking. Mark connected his laptop to a portable antenna he had bought that morning. If there was a hidden network embedded in the walls, this would amplify it. The screen flickered, then it lit up with data. Mark's heart raced. Dozens of devices appeared. Micro cameras, audio sensors, motion trackers. Not consumer-grade industrial. Custom-built. "This isn't just spying," Mark muttered. "This is surveillance." A message arrived. "You're crossing a line," Mark finally typed back. "You crossed it years ago." The devices weren't just in obvious places. They were inside the structure itself, behind bricks, along wiring channels, inside support beams. Removing them would mean tearing the house apart. And that was the point. Mark followed the signal map. Every device routed to a central node beneath the house. The basement. Mark hadn't gone down there before. The door had been locked, and the landlord had brushed it off as a storage issue. Now the lock was gone. The basement stairs creaked as Mark descended. The air grew colder, heavier. The smell of dust and metal filled his lungs. At the bottom, he saw it. A wall that didn't belong. Newer concrete, poorly disguised. Mark's phone buzzed again. "Don't." Mark ignored it and pressed his palm against the wall. It was hollow. He grabbed a nearby tool and struck. The concrete cracked. Behind it was a room. A control room. Monitors lined the walls, some old, some new. Hard drives stacked like bricks. Red recording lights blinked steadily, capturing every angle of the house above. And more other houses. Mark's stomach turned. Feeds from bedrooms, kitchens, hallways. Dozens of homes. Different families, different years. This wasn't one man watching one house. This was a system. A voice echoed behind him. "You weren't supposed to find this." Mark spun around. The former tenant stood at the base of the stairs, calm, almost proud. "You ruined something beautiful," the man said. Mark's hands shook. "You're sick." The man smiled. "No, I'm careful." He stepped into the room, gesturing at the screens. "Do you know how much people reveal when they think they're alone? Fear, love, betrayal, truth." "You recorded lives," Mark said. "You destroyed them. I preserved them," the man replied. "The world forgets. I don't." Mark noticed something then. The man wasn't improvising. He believed this. Deeply. "Who are you?" Mark asked. The man's smile faded. "Someone who learned early that being unseen is power." He moved closer. This house was a gift, built by men who understood surveillance long before the digital age. "I simply perfected it." Mark backed away slowly. His mind raced. He needed proof. He needed to get out. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The man stiffened. "You called them." Mark didn't answer. The man's calm shattered. "You don't understand what you've done. This network protects me. Without it, I'm exposed." "You should be," Mark said. The man lunged. They struggled, crashing into a table of equipment. Screens flickered, feeds glitching, alarms began to sound. Mark shoved the man away and ran up the stairs. The house seemed to groan, as if reacting to the chaos beneath it. As Mark burst through the front door, police cars screeched to a halt outside. Officers rushed past him into the house. Minutes later, the former tenant was led out in handcuffs, his face twisted with fury. "You think this ends me?" he shouted. "Others will continue. Watching never stops." Mark watched in silence as the man was taken away. But relief didn't come, because inside the basement, officers were discovering the truth. This wasn't just a crime. It was evidence of something much larger. A hidden network of homes. A community built on watching. As detectives approached Mark, one of them spoke quietly. "This goes deeper than you think." Mark nodded slowly. He already knew. And somewhere, beyond this house, other cameras were still on. Still recording, still watching. The climax wasn't the arrest. It was the realization that privacy itself had been under attack for decades. And the worst part? Most people would never know. The house was sealed by the authorities before sunset. Yellow tape wrapped around the doors and windows like warning scars, and police vans remained parked on the street long after the former tenant had been taken away. Neighbors stood in clusters, whispering, pointing, replaying years of small unease they had never been able to explain. Mark and Elena sat in the back of a police car, wrapped in borrowed blankets, watching the place where their nightmare began. They expected relief. What they felt instead was grief, because the house hadn't just taken their privacy. It had stolen their sense of innocence. Inside the station, investigators laid out the truth piece by piece. The control room beneath the house was only one node in a larger web. Hard drives recovered from the basement contained decades of recordings, meticulously labeled, encrypted, and backed up to off-site servers. The former tenant wasn't a lone predator, he was a curator. The house had been designed during a forgotten era, built by people obsessed with observation, believing society could be controlled by watching it closely enough. Over time, the original purpose had faded, but the infrastructure remained, and men like him had learned how to use it. This network spans multiple cities, an investigator said quietly. Some of the houses are abandoned. Some are still occupied. Elena felt her chest tighten. Then why hasn't anyone stopped it? The investigator hesitated. Because most people never realize they're being watched. And those who do often sound unbelievable. Mark understood then why previous tenants had vanished from records, why complaints had gone nowhere. Surveillance thrived in silence. Days later, the story broke. At first, it was a whisper, then a headline, then a storm. News outlets called it one of the largest hidden residential surveillance scandals ever uncovered. Victims came forward in waves, recognizing rooms, voices, moments they had thought were private. Some cried, some screamed, some went completely quiet. The former tenant's name became public, but it didn't bring closure. During interrogation, he refused to give up others involved. He spoke calmly, confidently, as if he believed he was part of something inevitable. "You can arrest one watcher," he told detectives. "You can't arrest the desire to watch." His words spread online, unsettling millions. Mark and Elena moved again, this time into a small apartment with bare walls and open windows. No smart devices, no cameras, no illusions. At night, Elena still woke suddenly, convinced she could feel eyes on her skin. Mark installed locks, then replaced them, then checked them again. Trust had become fragile. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the glass, Elena asked the question they had both been avoiding. "Do you think it's really over?" Mark didn't answer right away. He thought about the drives still being analyzed, the houses not yet found, the viewers who might never be identified. "I think," he said carefully, "it's over for that house." Elena nodded, though the answer didn't comfort her. Weeks passed. The case continued. Arrests followed. Lawsuits exploded across the country. New regulations were proposed. Politicians promised change. But Mark knew something deeper had shifted. People began to look at their homes differently. Vents seemed suspicious, smoke detectors unsettling. Smart devices felt less smart and more invasive. The illusion of privacy had cracked. One night, Mark received an email from an unknown sender. No threats, no taunts. Just one sentence. "You did the right thing." Most people wouldn't. Mark stared at the screen for a long time before deleting it. He didn't reply, because he understood something now. Watching creates power, but refusing to look away creates resistance. Months later, the house was demolished. No ceremony, no crowd. Just machinery tearing down walls that had hidden secrets for generations. As the foundation collapsed, investigators uncovered one final detail. A plaque embedded deep within the original structure. No names, no dates. Only 4 words etched into metal. "Observation is control." Mark read the report and closed the file. That sentence explained everything and warned of what was still possible. Today, Mark and Elena live quietly. They don't share much online. They don't assume safety comes from walls alone. They understand that privacy isn't guaranteed, it's defended. If this story unsettles you, it should, because the most dangerous cameras aren't always hidden in walls. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight. And the question isn't whether someone could be watching. It's whether you'd notice if they were, and whether you'd have the courage to stop it. This story ends here, but the conversation it started should never end.